Good morning. Thank you for joining us for a conversation with the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq, Barham Salih, an old friend of the Woodrow Wilson Centers. My name is Mike Van Duzen. I'm Deputy Director of the Center, and I'm here today because Hala Esfandiari, the Director of the Middle East Program at the Woodrow Wilson Center, has been detained in Iran and could not be with us. Hala is a first-rate scholar, a valued colleague of all of us at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and we see the charges as they've been reported in the press against her to be totally unfounded. We have been pleading through a number of sources here, Europe, and in the Middle East, pleading for her release so that she can rejoin her family and come back to her work. We ask that all of you think about her during this session and beyond. But thank you for being here today. A special welcome. We're extraordinarily pleased to have the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq with us. And this is going to be a conversation. A public policy scholar here at the Center, Henri Barkey, who is chairman of the Department of International Relations, I believe, at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and is here with us for 5 months working on a book on Iraq and its neighbors, as you would have it. He is going to ask questions, and I turn the floor over to Henri.
Thank you, Michael. Let me just correct the record. I'm not writing a book. Don't expect a book from me. I'm very happy here to welcome Barham Salih, His Excellency, whom I've known for a long time. And the way we'll do it is I'll ask a few questions and start the conversation rolling, and then we will open up to the public and we'll ask you to ask questions. But just a couple of cautions. Please ask questions. There are lots of people in here, so let's not make too very long statements. Secondly, if you do have any toys with you that you would like to turn off, this is a very good moment to do it. And we'll talk later. Barham, welcome. You've been here a week at least, and you've gone around Washington and talked to a lot of people, some of whom we don't get to talk to. But what I wanted to know is that clearly the sense in Washington is that there's a growing level of frustration with the Maliki government, to which you belong. There's a great deal of worry about the performance of the government. So what is your sense of what these frustrations are? How would you assess them, both on the administration side as well as on Congress? And I know you've gone to the Hill and you've talked to a number of people on the Hill, including many senators.
Well, thank you, Henri, and thank you, Mike. Thank you for this opportunity, and it's wonderful to see so many friends here today. And I hope it won't be long before Hala would come back and rejoin her family and rejoin the center. And I pray for her, and we hope that she will be released soon.
Thank you very much.
I have spent a week in Washington. I live in Baghdad. Baghdad is a tough, tough place, undeniably so. But I've discovered that Washington is tougher. Thank God you don't have the type of violence that we have to deal with in Baghdad, but undeniably the political environment in Washington has grown very impatient with the situation in Iraq. I'm here to talk to various people in the administration as well as on the Hill. I've had very candid discussion, very serious discussion, and some of you know me from times past. I would not allow myself to become an apologist for anybody. I'm here to talk about the situation as I see it. I can understand the frustration that many Americans feel about perceptions of lack of progress in Iraq. I can tell you also many Iraqis are frustrated with the situation in Iraq. 4 years ago, when Saddam Hussein was overthrown, many Iraqis, overwhelming majority of Iraqis, expected stability and prosperity a lot sooner than the 4 years that we have been in. So we have to accept, we have to recognize, and we have to have the courage to admit that things are tough and are difficult, and not allow ourselves to be victims of wishful thinking. The transition in Iraq has definitely proven to be much more difficult than was anticipated originally. If anything, we are all victims, Iraqis and Americans for that matter, of expectations. People expected that building a democracy in the heart of the Middle East in Iraq would be somewhat of an easy proposition. We have all discovered to the contrary. I can explain why, from at least my vantage point, dealing with the situation day in, day out. I've, as I said, spoken to many senior people in the administration and on the Hill. I think all, to be fair, recognize that the stakes are high in Iraq. Failure is not an option. Sorry. Thank you. Failure is not an option, and this is not your conflict of choice, and this is a lot more than Iraq at stake here. I think many people understand this. I am worried about one thing, that the debate in the United States has become very partisan, and in that partisan context it's difficult to get to the reality of the situation. Let me offer you and offer the audience how I see it from inside the government, from Baghdad. The government led by Prime Minister Maliki is one factor in a very complex dynamics. Iraq is going through a transition. This is a nation that was traumatized by 35 years of tyranny, a nation that has been polarized by ethnic and sectarian divides, a nation that has its economic infrastructure totally devastated, a nation that has seen wars and sanctions over the last 3 decades, almost in succession without any lull. Furthermore, this is a nation that is being hit by a tornado of terrorism day in, day out. For you Americans, must understand this thing more than others. Think of September 11th happening over and over again to your country, and imagine the type of social, political consequences and drama that will afflict upon your society. Think of Virginia Tech 10 times over happening every day to a society, and expecting in the midst of such a tough battle against this lethal, ruthless, determined enemy called terrorism, to think about building institutions of democracy and respect for law and human rights and meeting benchmarks and addressing the Washington audience and others. I'm not here to offer apologies for lack of progress. We could do better, definitely. We can do a lot better than what we have done, and I think if anything it is about Iraqi leadership and Iraqi leaders doing better, including myself. But please understand, this is not an abstract notion of nation building somewhere in an island in the Pacific. It is not. It is in Iraq, in the heart of the Middle East, while battling this lethal, ruthless enemy day in, day out. Think of it, Virginia Tech 10 times over every day over the last 3 years. People can talk about civil war in Iraq. People can complain about sectarian divide in Iraq. But there is another way of looking at it. Any other society that had been subjected to this type of barbaric onslaught day in, day out would have been in an all-out civil war. If anything, it is remarkable that Iraq has not slid into an all-out civil war. Having talked about the domestic Iraqi situation and this talk with Al-Qaeda and these extremist violent organizations, Iraq is part of that region only. You know this better. And I hope that you will write a book about Iraq and its neighbors, because this is not just about Iraq alone. This is about the entire neighborhood. Everybody has a stake in this conflict. Everybody in that region is a player in Baghdad. Every issue that we deal with in the government, in the political leadership, in this Policy Council of National Security, you would be amazed at the dimensions of Iran, Turkey, Arab world, the United States. So I'm just offering you the complexity of the situation. Are these good answers to avoid responsibility for what is happening as leaders of Iraq? Definitely not. I will readily accept to you and tell you, and I've told this to many people in the administration because I've said this to the Iraqi parliament, I've said it to my colleagues in cabinet, that we can do better and we need to do better. This is a unique opportunity. I mean, the enemies of decency and freedom in our part of the world do not want us to succeed. They are determined. We need to be doubly determined. And we have some very important issues in terms of our political system that is yet not there. We need to really get to deal with it in a very decisive and fundamental way. We, 3 years ago or so, 2 years ago, we have adopted a permanent constitution for Iraq. That was a major achievement. Many of us thought of that constitution to be the blueprint, the framework for the pact among Iraqis, the political covenant that would unify Iraqis around a democratic federal state. I have to admit to you that that has not happened. There are still disaffected elements in my society that do not accept some terms of that constitution. Overwhelming majority of Iraqis do accept it, I have to say, but some others don't. We have to find, if we want to live in a country together with the different communities, we have to find ways by which we can bring them in, we can find compromises and so on. It is not easy. This is about also power sharing inside Iraq, and we are working on finding ways. I'm saying working on it. Those who are in control do not want to relinquish power easily, and those who have lost power want to restore the status quo ante. Perhaps we have reached at a critical juncture now in Iraq that we can start thinking in a serious way about what it will take in terms of creating this power sharing arrangement that will give the Sunnis, Shias and Kurds buy-in into the system so that we can create the formation, the construct, the alliance that will defeat terrorism in a serious way.
I will come to some of these questions in more detail in a moment, but what I was also curious to find out is, how do people in government, the different factions in parliament, respond to the debate that's going on here? Is it being watched? Is the government worried about it? Do they see an inevitable decision down the road here for withdrawal? How does the debate here interplay?
I would say most people are worried, and most people understand that if the situation in Iraq continues the way it is, and we do not deliver and we do not demonstrate progress, that we may squander American support, and that will be a big loss for those of us who believe American support is vital for our success in building a peaceful nation in Iraq, a democratic nation in Iraq. I think I know that many of my colleagues in government and in the political leadership are worried, and they're watching this debate very closely. And this globalization is an amazing phenomenon. I mean, every nuance of the debate in the United States is being watched and analyzed and overanalyzed. Some people understand it well, some people don't understand America. And perhaps this is one of the problems in the Middle East. I mean, the debate here sometimes is misunderstood in terms of its significance and what it means. But I can tell you also there are those who are watching this debate in the United States and are keen to get the Americans out. And they know that time is on their side. Time is not on the side of good Iraqis and Americans for that matter. They can simply wait you out. Let me talk specifically about this surge thing. This is important.
Which is my next question anyway. So.
Probably I had a preview of your questions. But no, the essence of time, many people are watching this debate in the United States that America's patience is running out. America will cut and run. For those who want American support and want to throw their lot with the United States, this is a chilling prospect, and some people may try to readapt and hedge the bets as they go along. Those who do not want America to be there and want to defeat the United States, they can just simply posture themselves to wait you out. The surge is going to take shape fully by September and so on. Some of these guys don't have to confront the surge directly. They just can wither away into the background and just wait you out because they know in 6 months' time that you will have to redeploy and move out and whatever. Some people, I have to say, watching this debate in the United States, take the wrong lessons from it, because I believe I've been lived in the United States for some time. I've watched American politics. At the end of the day, American democracy will do the right thing, and partisan differences will hopefully, usually at least from what I have seen, will be secondary to what is in their national interest. But some people don't see it that way, and they take solace from it, I have to say.
But since you opened the question of the surge, as you said, the first results of the surge will become evident in September, and the debate in this country has been, well, some Republicans at least are telling the administration that they will give the administration until September because that's when all the brigades will be in, and all the regions will be essentially occupied by these new brigades. But what does a surge need to do to be successful? And when I say successful, I mean, let's put the United States aside for a moment. From an Iraqi perspective, and you maybe as an individual, what are your benchmarks to say that the surge has been successful?
To be fair, the surge has been successful so far, and we have seen fundamental changes in security dynamics in many districts of Baghdad. And remember, the surge is in multi-phased, actually. We're moving into new phases and so on. Eastern part of Baghdad, by and large, has stabilized. Militias, most of militia men and so on, either have run away or there were some very serious operations against militias that have taken place and taken in. Some very serious operations have taken place in districts like Mansour, for example, in which major bomb-making facilities were uncovered and people were arrested. These unfortunately don't get much notice here in the media, but seriously, a lot of security operations that have taken place have been fruitful and positive. Another aspect of this thing, the Al-Qaeda and others have been forced to move away into areas outside Baghdad, attacking Mosul, attacking Erbil, yesterday attacking Mahmur, in Kirkuk, and we are seeing a situation where they are trying to divert us into other areas as well. But still, obviously, we have problems in Baghdad. I mean, nobody would expect that these car bombs and these suicide bombers will be dealt with in any time frame. I mean, we will continue to deal with that threat. We will continue to be confronted with that type of threat. My view and the view of many in the government, and certainly the view of the military commanders, are that the security aspect of the surge can only succeed, can only be sustained if there is a political track. That political framework is not yet there. The surge buys us time, gives us an opportunity to lock in a political deal that will create the alliance that can sustain any security gains in Baghdad or elsewhere. That is what is missing so far. Last week, the Prime Minister and the Sunni Vice President Tariq al-Hashmi have had a one-to-one discussion. I'm told from both sides it was a very fruitful and serious, candid discussion. We hope this will lead to some serious rearrangement inside the government as well as in the on the political scene, because we believe, many of us believe, that without a political framework, without a political solution, there is no security settlement.
So what is that political framework?
Power sharing, giving moderates of all camps a real buy-in to the system and a genuine participation in decision-making. This participation in decision-making and running government together, obviously with all due respect and deference to the institutional setups that we have based on the Constitution, but giving people the buy-in and the sense of sharing in decision-making, and by the same token, accepting to share responsibility against the terrorists and the extremists from whichever camp they would be.
But say, with respect to the Sunnis, what does buy-in mean from your perspective for the Sunnis? What are you going to offer the Sunnis for this buy-in?
Well, the Sunnis, they took part in the elections, they came into the government, they have a sense, they complain that they are not part of the inner workings of the government. Let's look at that and let's find ways by which they can have that confidence that they are part of decision-making. But that is conditional upon anybody who would be part of such an arrangement to take in full responsibility for defending the new order in Iraq and defending against the extremists and against the terrorists. Responsibility, and authority together.
So if this political component doesn't come into existence,
There will be no hope for the country.
Then what?
I would say more of the same, and that is not good. That is, to me, what we have is a very serious and dire situation that cannot be, these levels of violence cannot be sustained. No society can tolerate this thing. And one can think of worse situations, but let's not get to that. What we have is now is unacceptable. We have to have the courage and admit that the politics of the country is not able to deal with the type of threats that we have to deal with. We're dealing with a very lethal, ruthless enemy that is determined to push us beyond the brink to an all-out civil war. In order to defeat that enemy, we as Iraqis, Kurds, Arabs, Sunnis, Shias, have to come together, and we will not be able to have everybody on board. I'm talking about the center of this political spectrum, the moderates, quasi-moderates, whatever the terms would be, coming together and say, this is not on. These are, Al-Qaeda is an enemy of all, Kurds, Arabs, Sunnis, and Shias. And by the way, on that count, there is a very important development that is noticed somewhat, but I don't think it has been given enough attention. What is happening in Anbar? Tribes are taking on Al-Qaeda in a very serious way. There is a very real war taking place between tribes and Al-Qaeda. In Diyala, even some of the Sunni insurgents have been working with the Iraqi government security organizations against Al-Qaeda. This is what I'm talking about, creating the political front, the political formation that will defeat this enemy in a decisive way. The example of Kurdistan is a good example. We are able to defend against the extremists and against Al-Qaeda, even though they may have a success here and there, but in a fundamental way, is the reason why we do so is not because we have so many Peshmergas or so many security organizations. Yes, they are important, they are vital, but had there not been a serious political bloc, PUK, KDP and other Kurdish parties working together against these extremists, we would not be able to deal with these type of threats. And remember, we were insurgents ourselves as well before coming to government. An insurgency cannot be defeated just by military means. It has to have a political component. People have to be brought into the system and be given a stake to defend that system. We have had some important strides in that, but this is incomplete yet, and we need to do more of it.
Let me shift you to the Constitution and the oil law. I mean, those are changing the Constitution or revising the Constitution and passing the oil law are two of the benchmarks that have been discussed here in Washington all the time. Can you tell us a little bit about the status of those?
On constitutional review, I spoke to Sheikh Humam Hamoudi, who is the head of the Constitutional Review Committee in Parliament yesterday. There are some issues of contention still, but they are planning to go, he told me, I hope I remember this carefully, not this Tuesday, to Tuesday after to Parliament with a set of options that Parliament will have. There is a lot of push domestically as well as internationally to do this constitutional review. I think this will be done, but whether within the prescribed time period or not, I don't know, depends on the dynamics inside, because I mean what we are asked to do from the various communities, the Shias, the Kurds, and for that matter the Sunnis as well, is to everybody to give up something, and giving up in this environment is not easy, but I think the pressures are building domestically as well as internationally to push us into coming to an arrangement on this, but work is underway on that one. On the oil law, the Kurdistan Regional Prime Minister Nechirvan Barzani is going to come to Baghdad, I think, in the next few days, and negotiations will resume on the oil law. On the oil law, we have done the framework, which was the difficult part. That is quite a revolutionary, radical restructuring of the Iraqi oil sector. I'm proud of what we have done there. It keeps oil as a national resource. It emphasizes and asserts that oil will be a national resource and the revenues of oil will be shared by all Iraqis, and this is the most important element of this piece of legislation. This has not been in contention. What is in contention now is modalities, procedures, mechanisms by which this principle will be truly implemented. People look at checks and balances. about how to make sure that there will be genuine, equitable distribution of revenues. My hope is that we will finish this thing within this month, within May, because this is what all sides have agreed, that this will be presented to Parliament before the end of May. Again, context is important, Henri. This oil law in any other country, a stable country, peaceful country, no problems that type of Iraq would have, would take years to do. We've done the basic framework, which is the crucial piece of the legislation, in about 6 months' time. And this was the most contentious of all issues historically in Iraq. Oil was a tool in the hands of the state, was used to finance bureaucracies of repression. It was used as a tool of discrimination against entire communities in Iraq. Yet, in this environment in Iraq, in this polarized, difficult environment that we deal with, we sat down for about 6 months and we came up with this proposed legislation. We have missing pieces. I'm not saying it is 100% complete, but for me, it is a testament that there are many Iraqis who want this thing to work. There are others who wanted to fail or not succeed the way that we wanted. But really, it was remarkable what we have done in 6 months' time. I hope we will offer a success story by the end of this month. There is some gaps to be filled, and I hope that we will do it soon.
But my understanding was that one of those gaps is what happens to new oil discoveries. That the Kurdistan regional government was insisting on having control over contracts.
No, that's not, because according to the Constitution, new oil fields, non-producing fields, will be going back to the regions, and that point has not been in contention. There is 2 points of contention now exist. One, as I told you, about the mechanics of revenue distribution, which account, how, what are the checks and balances. Second one is the scope of INOC, Iraqi National Oil Company. What we have done in the basic law is we have restructured the oil sector. The Ministry of Oil will become the regulatory body. Operations will move to the Iraqi National Oil Company. And we have a federal council that will decide oil policy and will have overall oversight on policy making for oil and gas policy. There is a debate now about the role of INOC. Some of my colleagues in government are saying that all the major fields in Iraq will be handed over to INOC to manage. Some of us argue against that, saying no, we need to make it competitive because every Iraqi is a shareholder in the oil sector. Yes, there will be Iraqi national control over oil, and this is important, but in terms of managing any specific oil field, we need to look at what is best for the shareholders, for the Iraqi people. Which company will bring me more money and revenues? Maximizing revenues should be the basic criteria, not state control. This is a usual, classic economic policy philosophy discussion that we're having within the government. Is not political, it's not to do with Kurd, Arab, Sunni, Shia. There are many Arabs who are arguing against liberalizing the oil sector and opening it up for investment from international oil companies because we need technology transfer, we need investment, we need etc., etc., etc. Some others say, no, we can do it by Iraqi assets alone and we can have service contracts with outsiders to do it. Iraq today exports about 1.5 million barrels a day of oil. With the restructuring needed and with a bit of investment, we can, in the next 4 to 5 years, reach 6 million barrels a day of exports, or production, average production. Iraq is enormously wealthy. This is probably the only country, and this is what I say to many of my colleagues in Kurdistan, in Baghdad, in the south, in the western parts of Iraq. This is the only country that can offer each community a lot more than they are asking for, because it is enormously wealthy, it has amazing potential. It needs the vision and the leadership that can make it happen, and it needs sustained international support to make it happen.
Let me shift you to Sharm el-Sheikh and the neighbors. You took part in the meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh that brought together the the neighbors of Iraq and the compact, and I want to look at the regional aspect of this relationship. There are some rumors that the Saudi government has now basically decided they can't work with the Maliki government. On the other hand, there's a lot of concern about what the Iranians are doing, and yesterday's announcement that Iran and the United States will be meeting in Baghdad to talk about Iraq kind of gives the impression that there are only two countries that are important in Iraq, other than Iraq, obviously. That's the United States and Iran, and the others are not that important. And I also remember at one point a very senior Iraqi government official saying that all the neighbors are poachers. I want to get your sense of the relationship between Iraq and its neighbors. What happened in Sharm el-Sheikh? Do you think there's a better understanding, or is it going to be, as far as the neighbors are concerned, as distinct from, let's say, Washington, more of business as usual?
Well, you know, I'm a government official. I cannot talk about rumors. And once I get out of government, Mike, you'll offer me a job here and we'll talk very freely and openly.
Happily.
Absolutely. No, I was in Sharm el-Sheikh and I thought that Sharm was an important event, actually. A start of a process. There were two conferences. There was, the first day was devoted to launching the international compact with Iraq. And that is an important document, not because I worked on that document, but I think the significance and the potential of that document and that process is important, and it's important that Americans understand it a bit more, I think. The compact was an initiative of the government of Iraq. We put together a framework for political, security, and economic reforms, a roadmap to reach to a stable, democratic Iraq. This, according to the Iraqi vision, requires political reforms, reconciliation, changes of De-Baathification law, power sharing, respect for human rights, restructuring government, a whole host of things. On the security front, enhancing Iraqi security capabilities, making them more professional, weeding out sectarian elements, all these things that are important. On the economic front as well, it talks about a 4 to 5 year plan about how to create a self-sufficient economy in Iraq, restructuring the oil sector, reforming and investing in the agriculture sector, the tourism in Iraq, you name it, a whole host, a very elaborate plan. Political, security, and economic, and all in one document that was endorsed by the Iraqi cabinet and representing the Iraqi vision. This was a way of Iraqis saying this is what we want to do with our country. We presented it to the United Nations, and obviously the UN, to be fair, were part of this process from day one. They co-chaired the process with us, but we presented it in a variety of meetings together with our friends in the United States, the UK, European Union, and Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Kuwait, presented to the rest of the world saying this is the Iraqi vision. These are a set of reforms that are needed to stabilize Iraq and create a stable, peaceful, federal democracy in Iraq. We need the help of the rest of the world. This is tantamount to a contract between Iraq and the rest of the world. These are the reforms that we will do, but you, the rest of the world, come along and relieve your debt, offer economic assistance, technical assistance. The neighbors stop interfering in our domestic affairs, respect our sovereignty, and cooperate with our government on security matters. We were pleased to see that 74 countries and international organizations attended that meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh and endorsed that document, that Iraqi blueprint. I have to say these all are wonderful commitments and promises by the Iraqi political leadership. The key will be implementation. They will not be easy to implement in even a normal society. What about Iraq? There are those of us who are very serious about committing to this thing. Many countries came in at that meeting with pledges of support, including Saudi Arabia, who agreed to accepting the terms of the Paris Club deal by which 80% of Iraqi debt were eliminated. This was a very positive statement. And other countries have come in with similar support. The neighbors were all there. Obviously, the United States, the Europeans, and many Arab countries were there and supported this vision. Now it is incumbent upon us in Iraq to really deliver on that compact. And that compact is basically, it's a compact to the international community, but it is a compact based on an Iraqi compact. This is what Iraqis, Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds have said that we want to do with our country. Let's all rise to that challenge and do it. The next day meeting was the neighbors meeting with the United States and with the P5 and the G8. All wonderful statements of support for Iraqi transition. But the question, the time has come for implementation. As we talk about Iraq, this side of the bargain that we need to deliver, the neighbors of Iraq really have to step up to the challenge and deliver on meaningful cooperation with the government of Iraq, because this situation is definitely what is happening. The conflict of Iraq, the conflict in Iraq has a serious regional dynamic to it. And the neighbors need to understand that continued instability in Iraq will mean instability across the region. Iraq is the center of the Middle East, is a very important country, a pivotal country. This dynamic cannot be allowed to continue. This conflict allows for Al-Qaeda and extremism of different forms to regenerate, and this will not be a problem for Iraq alone, it will be a problem for the entire region. I can understand that some of our neighbors have qualms and problems with the government. They want to see movement on this and that, but this is best dealt with through official channels and diplomatic channels. In terms of whether the fate of Iraq will be sealed and decided just by the United States and Iran, I don't think so. It will have to be decided fundamentally by the people of Iraq. This has to be about the free will of the Iraqi people. But yes, we are part of this region, and all the neighbors have a stake in what is happening in Iraq. I think the Arab world is a key component of the stability of Iraq, cannot be ignored, cannot be sidelined. A regional framework with the Arabs, Iranians, and Turks for that matter, plus the United States and the Europeans, will be the framework, the international / regional framework that will be needed to support Iraqi stability. Salvation of Iraq, stability of Iraq is contingent upon a domestic pact among Iraqis, a grand bargain among Iraqis who would be willing to come together in a serious, meaningful way to take on the challenge of defeating extremism and terrorism. But that can only work if there is a regional international pact supporting this domestic pact. It cannot be done alone by us. It cannot be done alone by the outsiders.
But what is it, for example, that the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Turks, or the Iranians we know a little bit more, but let's say the other countries can do to support that internal pact?
Saudi Arabia and the Arab world is a key component of this regional balance, and Saudi Arabia is an important center of gravity for a variety of political, cultural, and security reasons. And they have a stake in what is going on in Iraq, and there is an active dialogue through a variety of channels with Saudis on this matter. And I think recent event in which Saudi Arabia hosted the Arab Summit, Iraq was a key theme in that summit, and Saudis were supporting efforts to bring stability to Iraq and help bring about political reconciliation among Iraqis.
Okay,
and they have a lot to offer.
All right, let's turn the conversation to the audience. Please, when you ask a question, identify yourself and wait for the microphone.
Please, wait for the microphone.
This gentleman here.
Good morning. I'm Bob Dreyfus. I write for the American Prospect magazine and for Rolling Stone magazine. Polls have shown that outside of Kurdistan, overwhelming majorities of Iraqis, maybe 70% or more, favor the withdrawal of the American troops, the end of the occupation. And recently, a majority of the Iraqi parliament signed a bill saying with conditions that they also supported a timetable for the American withdrawal. Zbigniew Brzezinski says the only people who want America to stay in Iraq are the people who would have to leave when we leave. So what kind of democracy is it with a government like Prime Minister Maliki, which is not acceding to the wishes of what seem to be an overwhelming majority of his constituents?
Well, sir, I don't know of these polls, I have to say. I mean, I do see different data generated here and there, and I don't know about the quality of the data that you're talking about. But let me address your question. I deal with many Iraqis, both in the political elite as well as outside. I can tell you the following. Many Sunni neighborhoods in Baghdad are keen on keeping American troops in their neighborhoods because they trust the American troops and being honest brokers and being protective of their security. I can tell you senior Shia leaders, and I don't want to name names here, who continue to seek ways by which the Americans will stay there because they consider the United States to be the stabilizing factor. Without the United States, Iraq will become open for all kind of regional dynamics that will undermine their situation. As you've rightly identified, majority of the Kurds are in favor of the Americans to stay in. I think the dynamics on the ground really in terms of American military with Iraqi communities is different from the picture that you've depicted. There was a motion in Parliament the other day. I read about it and I spoke to some people inside, and including one of the proponents of this bill, a senior guy at the Sadris movement. He is saying, and he was quoted in the Washington Post, I think it was, I read in the Post, that the withdrawal of Americans will be conditional upon Iraqis building up their security capabilities, and this has been an accepted position by most Iraqis as well as the United States, that as we build our security services and Iraqis assume control, there will be no need to rely on the United States. But for the foreseeable future, I think there is no serious political movement with the except of the Sadris who demand an American withdrawal from Iraq in a serious way.
Over there. No, in front.
Hi, thank you. My name is Dave Pollack. Nice to see you again, Your Excellency. I just recently retired from the State Department. I'm now at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And my question has to do with something you mentioned in your remarks about a couple of, three actually, recent bombings for the first time in several years of Kurdish Democratic Party offices or headquarters, including two inside the Kurdish region in just the last week. This is something new and I think quite disturbing, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you think exactly is going on here, who is at fault, and whether perhaps this might have something to do, not perhaps with Al-Qaeda, but with the controversy over Kirkuk and the referendum.
No. I think according to our information, it is Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda is pushing very hard in Kirkuk because they recognize Kirkuk to be a potential fault line, Kurd-Arab, where they can instigate a civil war. Al-Qaeda has been very resourceful and masterful in pushing where it hurts. And when they attack the mosques in Samarra, and when they attack Sadriya in Baghdad, that poor district, when they attack Kirkuk, when they attack Erbil, they know what they're doing. I mean, obviously these were very painful episodes, but, and we should expect, by the way, that Al-Qaeda will try to attack elsewhere in Iraq in order to shatter this image of stability in certain parts of Iraq. And they're trying very hard, and it's very difficult to stop. The United Kingdom had difficulty stopping some of these Al-Qaeda cells operating. Spain had difficulty. Needless to say, the United States, with all its intelligence and security capabilities and with its two big oceans protecting you from the rest of the world, had difficulty stopping it. This is a lethal phenomena that is not easy to deal with. And if we think that one incident or even more that means the end of stability in Kurdistan. It is not. What we hope is to replicate the example that we have in Kurdistan and the rest of the country. I was in Najaf 2-3 weeks ago. The situation in the south, by and large, on Al-Qaeda is good, even though we have in Karbala some problems. They have been attacking there and have been trying to target the shrines and the pilgrims in Karbala. We are making some headway in Diyala, even though we have problems, I have to admit, but I mean there are some changes in dynamics. As I told you, there are some important dynamics that are happening in Anbar. We need to nurture and sustain these dynamics, because this is what's going to defeat Al-Qaeda. Changes in political dynamics, changes in people's dynamics, so that environment will be less permissive. But Al-Qaeda, ladies and gentlemen, is a ruthless, determined, lethal enemy that has no qualms and has no bounds in terms of attacking human life. And we can never be complacent about it. And this is an important message I think that Americans need to understand. Iraq is not just about Iraq. It is about the future of the Middle East. It is about the future of Muslim societies that have been radicalized. And we've just witnessed what that radicalization means. There is a sea change across the Middle East. And Iraq is no Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda and its affiliate organizations and that form of Islamic extremism, whether Shia or Sunni, but cannot be allowed to take root in that part of the world.
Mike.
From the overflow room, Barham, two questions. What should the United States on the ground in Iraq be doing differently to help the Iraqis achieve political reconciliation? The second part, there's a growing talk about the idea of another Dayton-style negotiation outside the chaos of Baghdad in order to broker an agreement to govern among the Iraqi factions. What's your reaction to a Dayton-type kind of conference?
I have to say about American posture now in Iraq, I welcome the emphasis on Iraqi leadership and Iraqi responsibility. At the end of the day, Americans cannot deliver for us. We have to deliver. But America, we hope, will be there to help us deliver for our own people. That posture, instead of just blanket support, has moved into that, and that is, I welcome it, because I think one of the things that we have seen about American policy in the past, not in Iraq, elsewhere perhaps, you feed complacency, you feed bad forms of government, and we, at the end of the day, it's our country, and we need to deliver for our own people, and I hope the American power and prestige will be there to help us do the right thing for our country. Your next question was about Dayton-style
negotiation.
You know, I know Rand wrote a piece in the Post about this. I think it is important to be done in Baghdad. It is important to be done in the region. There is a case to be made for an active diplomacy to lock in what I call this grand bargain, this Iraqi pact that will need to be, for it to be successful, supported by the region and by the international community. Whether you can bring Iraqis to Y Plantation or to Dayton or wherever, or do it in Baghdad, I think this should be done in Baghdad and with due deference to the basic elements of the political process. Outside that, it may become difficult.
Mm-hmm. No, you go ahead.
Gentleman here. Here.
Thank you very much. Omar Sheikh Mus, Chief of the Kurdish Service of Voice of America. Thank you, Your Excellency, for a very candid and solid conversation and providing us with some basic information. There is a lot of speculation as to the size of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and the insurgency. I would like you to give us an idea as to what's the proportion as far as these operations that are carried out by Al-Qaeda and by the insurgency, whether it's Sunni insurgency or the some of the Shiite militias. What's the proportion there of their strength, presence, and the level of carrying out these activities? My second question is, how much of it, as far as their logistics and their capabilities are concerned, is indigenous and how much is provided by the neighboring states? Thank you very much.
I think it's important to distinguish between two forms of violent groups in Iraq. One is Al-Qaeda and its affiliates that are out there to destroy everything we care for. And I cannot see any prospects for any deal or dialogue or accommodation with these guys. It's a war to the finish, and I dare say neither Iraq nor the United States has an option of failure against Al-Qaeda. And no matter how frustrated we feel, no matter how disappointed we feel, this battle against Al-Qaeda and its affiliate and its ideology is not to be lost. And I would dare tell you also there are no quick fixes to that. That's going to take a long time to defeat this threat, because this is not just about Iraq, this is across the region, and we need to be smart and active and serious about it. But there is another type of violent organizations in Iraq who have resorted to arms because of politics, or not because of, they have a political dimension to it. We have to do whatever we can in order to bring those into the process and spare no effort in order to accommodate them and bring them into the process, because enemy number one has to be Al-Qaeda, enemy number one has to be this extremist ideology of hate and destruction. And to be fair, many inside the government and the political leadership understand this thing, and we are encouraged by what we see in Anbar and in Diyala, where some of these insurgent groups are cooperating, at least tactically, with Iraqi security organizations and perhaps with the US military as well, against Al-Qaeda. And this needs to be nurtured and needs to be worked on. Al-Qaeda has a foreign elements to it. There are many foreigners who come across the border still, but it has an Iraqi component to it as well. It has definitely Iraqi recruits and an environment in which it operates through, which is Iraqi. And we need to deal with that, because that is dangerous. And our neighbors and our allies in the United States and elsewhere need to understand we cannot let Al-Qaeda win in Iraq. And again, Iraq is no Afghanistan. With its resources, with its geography, with its significance to the Middle East and world stability, this is not a place to run away from. We have to fix. One of the gentlemen asked me about people who care for the United States to stay, because those who care for the United States to stay will be the ones who would leave with the United States. There may be some of those, but I dare tell you that the overwhelming majority of Iraqis will stay in Iraq, because they have no other option but to stay in their country and cannot allow their country to become hostage to the terrorism of Al-Qaeda and these type of extremist organizations.
Gentleman in the middle there.
Barry Jacobs, the American Jewish Committee. General Buyukhanit, the chief of the Turkish General Staff, has publicly said that unless something is done to restrict the efforts of, or the ability of the PKK in northern Iraq to strike at Turkish targets, the Turkish military will do so on its own. He is encouraging the U.S. to use our, as he says, to speak with our friends in the region to do something. The State Department would like something to be done. My understanding is that the Defense Department has been more hesitant. What do you think will happen, and what can the people who run northern Iraq do to curb the efforts of the PKK, at least according to the eyes of the Turkish military?
Let me tell you the perspective of the government of Iraq, and I'll move into, I can wear the Kurdish hat on as well. Turkey is an important neighbor of Iraq, and we need good relations with Turkey. Unfortunately, our relations over the past few months have somehow become tense, and there are efforts underway in order to diffuse that crisis. Turks have two concerns about our situation, and by the same token, Iraq has some concerns about Turkish policies as well. On the PKK, Turkey as a neighbor has the right to expect Iraq to do all it can in order not to allow its territory to be used by any group to destabilize Turkey or any other neighbor of ours. And on that count, I can tell you that there are active work going on, dialogue between the government of Iraq and involving the KRG as well, with the government of Turkey and with the help of the United States in order to deal with the situation. There may be differences of opinion about how to deal with this, but at the end of the day, I think all agree that Iraqi territory cannot be used as a launching pad to threaten the security of any of our neighbors, and definitely that of Turkey. Turkey also, on occasions, and Turkish officials warn of Kurdish separatism and warn of the situation in Kirkuk. We tell our Turkish neighbors, while we appreciate your concern and interest in Iraq, but please be mindful of respecting our sovereignty, Kirkuk or any other matter for that sake. These are internal issues of Iraq, and Iraqis will be dealing with them in accordance with their own constitution and their own political arrangements. Interference in our domestic affairs will not help us, will not help Turkey either.
But let me just follow up on this. Do you think the Kirkuk referendum will be postponed this year for technical reasons, not for political?
There is no thought to that. I mean, there are commitments by the government of Iraq under the constitution to deliver on a variety of steps, including normalization and referendum. No talk of this thing has been raised by anyone.
But the normalization hasn't taken place yet.
It's beginning to. It's beginning to. And there were decisions in cabinet to do this thing, to start the process, and a budget was allocated. And I have not seen any notions to the contrary. There are people who are asking for a delay, but nothing formal has come across. At the end of the day, Kirkuk will be a very important issue for Iraq, for Kurdistan, and about the nature of Iraq that we want. I can tell you the following. Many people predicted Kirkuk to be the powder cake, the flashpoint that, from which civil war will ignite in the whole of Iraq. I mean, the last 4 years, Kirkuk, if anything, compared to many other parts of Iraq, has been much more stable. And remember, Kirkuk has been the scene of a terrible form of ethnic cleansing over the last 3 decades. And it is remarkable how people being responsible and constrained about how to deal with it. I agree now, as we approach that constitutional deadline, temperatures will rise and tension will rise. And now it is incumbent upon us to really make sure that Kirkuk, instead of remaining a problem, the problem that it has been over the last 3 decades, will not become the problem for the next 3 decades. We have a constitutional roadmap by which the indigenous people of Kirkuk will decide the fate of Kirkuk, the administrative status of Kirkuk. This is a good arbitration, this is a good political measure to do it, and I hope it will be done without allowing extremists to hijack this process.
All the way at the back.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm Brian Murphy, and first I want to thank you for your very strong support of the property claims process in Kirkuk and other Kurdish areas. You were really a beacon. I want to ask you, sir, about efforts to bring together religious leaders in Iraq. One hears different things about whether the U.S. Department of State is supportive of this. The Department of Defense seems to be. It seems so very important. I speak very personally, not as any kind of U.S. government representative.
That was the question about religious leaders coming to the United States? Sorry.
No, sir. There is, for example, right now, an effort to bring together religious leaders in Iraq. And it's unclear that there's much support by the U.S. government.
There was a meeting recently in Mecca that the Saudi monarch has hosted for Iraqi religious leaders. They signed a declaration which was important. The religious establishment in Iraq has a key role in moderating behavior. Unfortunately, there are the extremists who are using religion to destabilize and polarize the society further. The government is supportive of anything that the moderate religious establishment can do in terms of supporting political reconciliation. And there is a gentleman whom I deal with in Baghdad every now and then. They have an initiative with the Anglican Church in Andrew White, indeed, and we have been supportive and working with them. Anything that can help dialogue between the various sects and religious leaders it would be something that is positive, and we would be supported.
Here, in the middle, please.
Hi, Jonathan Landay with McClatchy Newspaper. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, a long time.
It has been. I would like to ask about the degree to which Iran has been involved in supporting the insurgency. The American government likes to say, or has been saying, that it has been, Iran has been, as part of an official policy, shipping in weapons, ammunition, explosives, resources for Shiite insurgents, and indeed also now we're hearing Sunni insurgents. I'm wondering if you could talk about sort of your view or the government's view of that situation and how much you see, the degree to which you see Iranian involvement with these violent groups.
I'm a government official, right?
Right.
Okay.
But you can pretend you're not for a little
No,
while.
I can't. No. Now, let me answer you the following way. Iran is a neighbor of ours. We have 1,400 kilometers of borders with Iran. Iran and Iraqi relations have been very rocky and very problematic over the last, not just three decades, over the last century. It is in the national interest of Iraq to have good relations with Iran. I believe also Iran should have the same interest, and enough is enough. This region should move away from conflict into area where we can cooperate on things that matter for the peoples of that part of the world. But that can only be achieved if people are respectful of each other's sovereignty and non-interference. Iran has equities and has influence inside Iraq emanating at least over the last 3 decades when Iran aided the Iraqi opposition. And some Iraqi opposition groups still may act as like opposition groups and maintain those ties of the past and have not moved to the mentality and mind frame of being part of the state, and perhaps such transition takes some time. We continue to remind our Iranian neighbors of our desire to having good relations with them, because this is in our interest, and by the same token demand of them to respect our sovereignty and not interfere in our affairs. We ask of the Iranians and ask of the others as well not to turn Iraq into a stage for settling scores with other neighbors or with the United States. And perhaps the Sharm el-Sheikh conference was an opportunity to impart the following message. Iraq has been a point of contention in international and regional relations. Many people have looked at the Iraqi case with different angles. Now the time has come, given the serious and grave nature of the transition stage we are in Iraq, instead of Iraq becoming a domain of conflict where these powers fight it out through proxies, for the stability of Iraq to become a point of consensus between Iran, the Arabs, the Turks, and the United States, because I think stability of Iraq should be a common interest for all. The continuing violence in Iraq and the opportunities it offers to Al-Qaeda and extremism is one that will not only haunt Iraqis and Americans, it will haunt the region as a whole, including the Iranians.
But you said you're a government official, but one of your colleagues, Mr. Dabak, who's the spokesperson for the government, was here a few weeks ago at the U.S. Institute of Peace, and he was far more willing to criticize the Iranians, and in fact saying that they are involved in a great deal of...
Good, yeah, the government spokesman said so. Good for him.
The gentleman here,
Yeah.
you had your... Yeah.
I'm Dr. Will Curtis from the U.S. Naval Academy. You mentioned a positive aspect of that resistance to Al-Qaeda in certain regions. I'm wondering, are there any plans to take advantage of that? How does the government and the U.S. assist those regions, and whether or not it can essentially lead to a spreading of that effect?
you would excuse me if I don't go into the plans that we have, but I definitely want to tell you that we need to nurture that dynamic. We need to support it and embrace it, because this is what will defeat Al-Qaeda at the end of the day. And we're working hard at it, and we are heartened to see the level of commitment from some of these tribal chiefs and even some of these insurgents who were taking us on in the past, who are looking at Al-Qaeda as the lethal, as the danger, as the public enemy number one.
But if you're going to fight Al-Qaeda, does success come first by defeating Al-Qaeda and then the remaining insurgency, or the insurgency first?
Life doesn't work that way. This is not about a computer program where you will have to fight all these things at the same time, and this is what makes Iraqi transition so difficult. And it's a good question that you're asking us. Can we fight Al-Qaeda and let go of the militias going killing people on sectarian grounds? We can't. Can we do all these things about the security of Baghdad and Diyala and Anbar and forget about the security of Basra and the smuggling of oil that is taking place in Basra and is financing militias and the bad guys? You can't. I mean, in one single incident, I mean, I don't know whether this was reported here or not. As we were doing the initial planning for Baghdad security plan, we looked at the issue of fuel, how to bring in fuel, kerosene and gas to Baghdad, because you need to provide services and regenerate the economy and so on. We knew that we had a major problem with Beijing refinery. Beijing refinery was essentially territory under enemy control. Some estimates were speaking of $1.5 billion a year going to the insurgents and the bad guys from smuggling fuel, products and so on from Beijing refinery. It took really a military operation to liberate Beijing refinery. And now Beijing refinery is supplying fuel products to Baghdad, to the Kurdish areas and others. And that has come back under Iraqi control. We have a problem in certain parts of Basra, the port of Basra. This is a country in transition. And the number of challenges that we deal with in, day out is phenomenal. And you cannot just say, I'm going to take on Al-Qaeda while ignore what's going on there. I mean, that is obviously, I'm talking about the security challenges of every day that we deal with, not to mention the politics and not to mention the other challenges that we have to deal with. We have an active outreach program emanating from the Sharm el-Sheikh conference with the region, with the international community. Soon we will be talking with the UN about an enhanced role of the United Nations in Iraq. How can the UN play a greater role? Because while we care very much for an active American role in Iraq, which is key, crucial, you are the leader of the free world and your posture is very important for us, but we understand that there needs to be burden sharing and there needs to be much more of an international approach to this issue of Iraq, where other players come in, because it is not just about Iraqis and Americans fighting Al-Qaeda and defeating extremism in Iraq. We are doing this thing on behalf of the rest of the world. The time has come for the rest of the world to step up and be part of this thing and shoulder responsibility with us. And I think what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh with 74 countries and international organizations willing to endorse this roadmap for Iraqi recovery is a good start. We can build on it. So we have, Henri, I mean, this is not an easy situation. And please understand, if you think that this can be fixed anytime soon, won't be fixed. This will be a gradual, bumpy road. But failure is not an option in Iraq. Success is difficult, very difficult. The success, the way I define it. But it is doable, and we have no option, but we have to do it.
Over there, just in front of you.
John Moore, formerly of the Pentagon. I'd like to ask you about, in the Washington Post this weekend, we had an op-ed by Mr. Bremer defending his position on de-Baathification. I'm wondering if you could let us know what the status of de-Baathification reform is, or where we are in this process.
De-Baathification was meant, as it was conceived early on, to be a way of weeding out senior Baathists from government so that the society will be able to move on. I have to admit that this was taken over by political agenda and was politicized and ended up doing more harm than good. And there is a swell of opinion inside Iraq that demands reform of that De-Baathification decree. The Prime Minister and the President have submitted to Parliament a proposed legislation to basically turn De-Baathification Commission into a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This is stuck in Parliament. There is some opposition to it. But from my vantage point, one of the elements of national reconciliation in Iraq will have to be this. Not because of any sympathy for the Baathists who have committed crimes, but because of the abuses that were done in the name of De-Baathification. They have abused the system, and there is payback. We have to assume responsibility for that, and we have to reach out to those people who were wrongly persecuted as a result of this thing. And we need something drastic. But it is in Parliament and it is being debated. This can be celebrated on one hand, a sign of Iraqi democracy. Parliament will have to debate it, and this is tough. It's like your Congress and your executive is not up to one man. We can celebrate it as this. And some people can say, oh, this a dysfunctional system and Iraq is not working. But I mean, you can't win either way.
Lady here.
Thank you. I'm Christina Asquith. I'm a scholar here at the Center, and I'm doing a book on women in Iraq based off my 2 years living in Baghdad in 2003 and 2004, when hopes were very high for women's rights. Can you bring us up to date? We hear very little now about what life is like for women on the ground in Iraq. And also, is there anything currently in the works in Parliament on behalf of women's issues or to prevent women's status from sliding into some sort of Sharia law or what perhaps the fundamentalists might like to see for women? Thank you.
Obviously, the violence is taking a big toll on women. And again, please think of this thing and through this prism that you have just recently lived through. Virginia Tech, 10 times over every day. And what traumatizing effect will have on a society. And certainly women will bear the brunt of these things. In the case of Iraq, we also have a major struggle going on between religious parties and those who espouse a religious ideology and want to establish all the religious values and impose it on personal life, and those of us who do not want that. And it's a struggle. But there are many women NGOs who are active, who are working hard on this matter. And to be fair also, some of them are from the moderate Islamist parties as well, who see this aggressive drive by some of the extremist religious parties as being very contrary to the soul of Islam and the values of Islam. It is a continuing struggle, but I can say that despite all these difficulties, we have 30% of the Iraqi parliament women representatives. They are very active. In many areas of Iraq, women NGOs are doing wonderful work in terms of delivering services, education, etc. I would urge you to supporting these NGOs, these indigenous NGOs, not the quote, just the westernized ones who can speak English and just come to Washington and fill in the forms and be helpful. There are grassroots organizations that are doing fantastic work in terms of reaching out. There is a program going on I'm working on with a couple of friends of mine, including the Minister of Environment, Nermin Othman, and Maysoon Damaluchi and Salam al-Khafaji, to basically bring in women from across Iraq into one major conference to say no to violence and about how to bypass the present political structures that we have and establish means of communication between the various communities to talk about these fundamental issues, not just women's right. It is about what women usually care for more than men, I would say, in situations of conflict, about human life and human dignity and education for the children and so on.
along the lines of just what you were commenting, Morris Wolf, international law professor, along the lines of what you're saying, we don't hear the leaders talking about peaceful resolution. It seems it's all fire to fight fire, military presence, almost as if we're drunk on the potentiality of a military solution, which the American people have decided in the last election doesn't look like the way out. So when will the leaders start talking about peaceful resolution, pacific resolution, and get together? And question number two, in the press I read an article that Maliki is not perceived as negotiable, so to speak, or a negotiator, that there's someone in the wings who has more negotiating skill, maybe younger, maybe more flexible. I don't have his name, but I read it in the paper. Who is this person, and what might this be? All right, this could be. This could be. If it is,
I
all
think
well
I will
and good.
take the job offer from Woodrow Wilson soon.
May I come back to my question and simply ask, why aren't we hearing more language publicly towards peace rather than recrimination and anger and all the rest of it?
Sir, I think to be fair, I hear a lot of that. And what I'm saying here to you, it is not just a single voice in the wilderness, no. I meet a lot of people in Baghdad. I meet a lot of parliamentarians. I meet a lot of journalists. I meet a lot of women activists, students. No, people have had enough. And they demand of the leaders better performance. I mean, and when I say that there is no military solution, I'm reflecting the views of many in Iraq. There is no political solution with Al-Qaeda. We have to defeat Al-Qaeda. There are no military solution with some of these extremist criminals who are just basically terrorizing people, and they need to be. But there is a part of the violence that is motivated by what they believe to be a political agenda. We need to talk about a political solution and settlement with these guys. And I think, to be fair, even the United States the U.S. administration has been emphatic about this, that there needs to be a political framework. The surge was devised as an idea, yes, to secure Baghdad, to stabilize Baghdad, but fundamentally, everybody recognized from day one, unless the politics is done right, unless the political framework is in, there is no sustainable military solution. I think most of us do recognize this thing, and this is whether Prime Minister Maliki is a negotiator or not. Prime Minister Maliki has become a prime minister through a certain political arrangement. These negotiations and these political arrangements, these political bargains will have to be struck between these various communities. I'm not talking community in an ethnic sectarian sense per se. You have Kurd Arab Shias and Arab Sunnis as key communities, but you have seculars and religious parties. You have different subsets of this thing. We need that political bargain to be locked in. I recognize that we are in a grave situation in Iraq today. And it's not good to say things are good. They're not. And we need to do better. But this crisis offers us an opportunity. And more people inside Iraq recognize that to be so. This offers us an opportunity 4 years on from the war that we need to review some basics, some fundamentals, and otherwise this dynamic just is not sustainable. And I hope also that our neighbors who have had a hand in creating this dynamic also recognize that this instability in Iraq, it is a matter of time before it will affect them too as well in a very, very serious way. But that does not mean, I hope your question does not mean that there is no military solution, which I agree with, means that we can take the military out of this equation. If you don't have the military component, there is no political solution either. Because with Al-Qaeda and with these murderers, there is no other way but to defeat them decisively.
I'll take one last question here.
Thank you, Andrew Apostolou. Comrade, you haven't mentioned Syria. Syria is a major state sponsor of terrorism, was involved last summer in a proxy war of aggression against a US ally, and is currently involved in a proxy war of aggression against you by letting people come across your border. What are you going to do about Syria?
Syria took part in the meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, and there were some very serious discussions with the Syrians, and there was a meeting between the Syrian Foreign Minister and Condoleezza Rice. Syria has to shape up and has to be more forthcoming with Iraq on security, and we have an active dialogue going on through a variety of channels with the Syrians. We need Syria to be part of the solution, not to be part of the problem. I keep my remarks to that end because we are serious about the need for Syria to cooperate in a meaningful way with the government of Iraq.
I said it was the last question, but there's one more.
Okay, sure.
Since you came 5 minutes late. Right.
Kasım Cindemir, Turkish Daily Hürriyet. Why is
Good to see you again. It has been a while.
Yes, nice to see you too. Why is your government so reluctant to move against the PKK? And I have one more. Did Saddam have any assets in Turkey? If so, have you asked for the return of those assets?
On the latter one, you've just given me an idea. Let's you and I meet and tell me if he has assets to pursue it. No. Sir, the PKK or any other issue affecting our bilateral relations with Turkey. We mean that we need good relations with Turkey. I spoke to the Foreign Minister, Abdullah Gül, a couple of weeks ago on Sharm el-Sheikh as we were preparing for this. And he emphasized to me the importance that Turkey attaches to good neighborly relations with Iraq. And I can assure you and assure the Turkish public is likewise on our side. We have issues like the PKK, which are not of today's making. This goes back almost 2 decades. And dealing with this problem, if you want to deal with it now and this very moment and the way that Turkey wants it, I probably will not be able to do it and cannot be done. And we have channels, and it's best these issues are dealt with if we are serious about it. If we're just posturing and talking just like that, is a different matter. But if we're serious about it, there are channels, Iraqi, American, and Turkish channels, including the KRG, where we are talking about these things in a meaningful way. At the end of the day, stability in Iraq is not an interest for the Iraqi people, it's also an interest for Turkey, and the horizon for Turkey-Iraq relations are positive, and let's not allow ourselves to become victim or hostage to rhetoric. We have a lot of common interests together, and let's pursue those through the proper channels. On the what? On the assets, I really don't have information on that one. If you have any, let me know.
Good follow-up question. Barham, I want to thank you for being with us. Henri, I want to thank you for moderating, and I want to thank everybody for coming. You're always welcome at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and I ask that you all think about Hala Esfandiari and help us in the pursuit of trying to have a return here soon. Thank you.